Oh, hello, me old chums. Boom! Surprise flex. Courtesy. That was in honor of my friend, the Golden One. Anyway, it's good to be back, guys. It's good to be back. I've been away. I've been traveling. I've been roaming the earth like a wandering person. And I have been to Poland, where I met some really cool pagans, and I participated in a May Rite. That was after I'd done all that filming of the May video that's just gone live yesterday in Cornwall and Devon. But the May Rite was unlike that. It wasn't like a folk tradition. It was an actual neo-pagan group. And it was great time, great food, great people in Poland. I like Poland. Warsaw is quite a nice city. It's quite pretty. And I met some really cool people. But then I went straight on from there to New York. And I met some cool people there. Some old friends of mine lived there, so I was staying with them. That was one of the reasons I went. But also I met someone who I've known online for a long time. That is the guy who runs the Brute Norse podcast. And those of you who are interested in Old Norse philology and things to do with the Viking Age and such, you should follow his podcast, Brute Norse. He also has a YouTube channel where he makes little adverts for his podcast and supplementary videos to go with the podcast. So it's great. And he took me to an event in the southern part of Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, I think it was called. It's way away out from the main stuff. You know, it's a long way from Hipsterville in Williamsburg. And there is where it used to be the Norwegian, like the Norwegian quarter, the Norwegian ghetto. And all of the Norwegian Americans cluster there on the 17th of May, and they have a big parade with Viking boats down the street and celebrate their Nordic heritage. So I just filmed and interviewed a few people there, and I'm going to make a video about that. That'll be one of the videos you can see coming up. It's about American Nordic heritage and how it's remembered in New York City. So yeah, and then I get back to England and finished off that video, and I see this uploaded by Henrik for Red Ice. This news from Sweden. Absolutely terrible news about what's happening there. And I mean, glad to see that pagan organizations in Sweden are against it, but dismayed to see that a certain pagan organization in Britain has sort of tried to downplay the severity of this proposal and just how wrong it is. And I'm going to go into that a bit today in the stream. And just I'll talk it all the way through and my opinions on it in the context of modern Swedish politics, what it really means, because I don't, I think it should be clear. I'm not just want to talk to converted. I mean, not everyone here is, right-wing patriotic. And I want to explain to you very clearly why anyone, whatever political beliefs you have, should be against legislation which limits the use of runes or any other ancestral and heritage symbols of Northern Europeans, or any Europeans for that matter. Oh, Lel, thank you for your super chat. Tyrannist spy, hey? I spy you. Tyrannists. You want to watch out for them. Bad cam. Oh no, not again. This has happened before in the past. It's not my camera. It's not my camera. It's my it's this connection, I think. Let me see if I can change it. Well, has that made it any better? I don't know. The last two streams, it's been like what you're calling potato vision. I don't know why, because it was fine before that. It used to be fine. Nothing has changed. But yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry if I look like a potato right now. You got low quality, then it must be because my signal's not working on the aerial there. But at least the audio is coming through okay. So let me just crack on. The little skeleton head by the window is a monkey skull, by the way. So I want to talk about this nonsense in Sweden. So let's do it. Since we might as well switch to a screen share, because you can't see me anyway, so it'll probably work better as screen share. Right then. So you got it. It's not just, I heard about it in Red Ice for the first time, but it's not just in Red Ice. You got the Russia Today and Sputnik News, a couple of Russian sites talking about it. Swedes up in arms as government mulls potential ban on ancient Nazi runes. Nazi runes? Well, there's no such thing. So the Swedish Justice Minister Morgan Johansson, he is the one who was in this position during the migrant crisis, it must be said. He is the one who has at least some responsibility for the massive amounts of rapes that have occurred in Sweden. I wonder if you could name a single one of the victims. And he is the one who's now very concerned about hate groups in Sweden and feels that a good way to deter them would be to ban symbols of Nordic heritage. Now, this is, it says here, it's enraged many Swedes who see Norse runes as part of their shared history. For those who identify as pagan or heathen, the potential ban has been interpreted as an assault on freedom of religion, which is guaranteed under the Swedish constitution. And the Nordic Ossa community, the largest heathen religious group in Sweden, has spoken out against it. This ancient origins thing has done a big summary of it as well, not providing any new news, but just linking all the useful things in it to the different people. I'll just read, though, from the website, what they said. Orsa Samfundet. Now, they're not a right-wing organization. It must be said. Orsa Samfundet are, they're just like, you know, I think if anything, they're a left-wing organization. But they're definitely not a right-wing thing. So it says, do not take our runes, or do not mess with our runes. In Sweden, we have something called freedom of religion, and it is considered a human right. Article 9 of the European Convention stipulates that the state is not entitled to, by law or by intervention, restrict the individual's right to freedom of religion. How can religious symbols and letters in the futhark that are thousands of years old be considered illegal? They have a basic meaning and symbol value that has been similar for a long, long time. The only way these expressions of our faith and culture can be seen as something negative is if they are interpreted by the political groups that use them. Runes and symbols are not politics. Ideology is politics. So they're very angry about it. And to them, the fact that right-wing people use the group is not an argument that use runes doesn't mean that they should be banned. Now, I've seen a British group, a British sort of non-right-wing heathen group saying that this is all fake news and there isn't a proposed ban. Now, that's wrong. It is a proposed ban. It is a planned restriction. Now, even if it is focusing predominantly on, it said the government is most concerned with specifically one group, one right-wing group who uses the Tyr rune, and they're essentially a National Socialist, the Nordic resistance movement, something like National Socialist anyway. The NRM, it's been around for a long time. It's not exclusively a Swedish movement. It's actually a pan-Nordic identity movement. So something like the Kalmar Union, I guess it supports. And they use the Tyr rune, which is a rune of the battle god, and they themselves believe in fighting, so it's an appropriate sort of rune for them to use. Now, it must be said that runes are, okay, we're thinking of them now in the context of religious freedom. That's the argument that Nordic Samfundet are using, and it's a good argument. However, runes were not used exclusively in pagan contexts, religious contexts during the pagan times. They were also used in quite mundane contexts. They could be used to write one's name on something, to signal that something was somewhere, what something is, ownership of something, whatever. Very mundane things, even writing jokes. And they weren't just used by pagans. The runes were continued to be used for a long time by Christians, and they were even used to make Christian monuments. So they weren't exclusively pagan symbols, but they were Nordic symbols, and they have remained so in the modern world. Now we see that, like, yes, some political groups have adopted them, but that doesn't mean that they can be limited. If you disagree with a political group, you don't have the right, therefore, to ban them from using ancestral symbols. That is not a right. And of course, certain groups, right-wing groups, are obviously going to be more interested in heritage. So to a right-wing group, the use of runes, if they're a Nordic group, is going to make sense because that's an ancient ancestral symbol. Now, there's also some crossover because a lot of the members of right-wing groups in Sweden happen to be pagans. Not all pagans are right-wing and not all right-wingers are pagans, but there's a big overlap. And it should be noted that if they were to restrict, if they said, oh, we're only going to restrict the use of runes to right-wing groups, that would still be infringing on the religious right of right-wing pagans anyway. But I don't think that you should focus exclusively on the religious aspect, because I believe that these runes are not exclusively for the use of pagans. They are also as well, because they are symbolic. They have symbolic and magical use for pagans, but they also have significant cultural usage in Sweden for many people who are not pagans, and the government does not have the right to deny them that. And it's very, very scary that anyone should suggest that that kind of legislation is in any way justified. Now, just before I continue on, someone's saying ban Bluetooth too. Well, thank you, Unconscious Abyss, for your donation of £5, much appreciated. And from Mark Hawkins, thank you for your £2 donation. Up next in Sweden, Sweden bans Swedes. It's almost like that. It's moving in that direction, isn't it? It's very silly. So now to continue. The recommendations, as you've noticed from what says here, are for the banning that Morgan has suggested. They are coming from things suggested by well, I mean, on International Holocaust Memorial Day, the Prime Minister of Sweden, Lofoten, I think his name is, the blobfish people know him as because he resembles one. He was reading about like hate symbols, and the recommendations for hate symbols were coming from Americans, a certain religious group in America, or rather an organization with ties to one religious group, had defined and determined which symbols were hate symbols, and the Swedish government took their recommendations seriously. And this is influential on Morgan's recommendations, which is why it's not just runes but other things, including this sigil, which is actually not from the Viking era. It comes from medieval Iceland. It's a magical symbol, and it doesn't have any right-wing meaning to it, but apparently someone thinks it does, and maybe a right-wing person used it once and that was enough to say it may be banned. Then you have, of course, Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor, and that too shall be is potentially going to be banned in certain circumstances. Now, this is a very holy symbol as well. It's a holy symbol, so it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's not something that just pagans should be outraged about. And I want to make that clear. This is not just an issue for left-wing heathens and right-wing heathens to debate. This is something for people who believe that not only pagans have a right to these symbols, but that because they must also be recognized to be symbols of heritage. For example, in Sweden, people of Iranian heritage very often wear Zoroastrian symbols, even if they aren't Zoroastrian, even if they practice Shia Islam. The reason they wear these Zoroastrian symbols is because the symbols of the Persian religion are also, as well as religious symbols, they also remain symbols of Iranian pride, ethnic pride, and that's absolutely fine. The Swedish government does not mind that Muslim people wear Zoroastrian symbols in Sweden. This is quite a common thing to encounter if you've ever been to Sweden and met Persian people there. But they do mind in this context. And if you think that they will limit their banning to just non-religious circumstances, you are wrong, because the term hate group is ill-defined, and this nebulous and sort of squelchy liquid definition that morphs according to the needs of the one who uses it can easily be adapted for circumstances of the politician employing it to basically prevent people from having the freedom to celebrate their ancestry, to celebrate their history, and in the case of pagans, to celebrate their gods. Now, this is a big problem. And it's a bigger problem than the so-called misappropriation of symbols. Symbols, the idea that they can be misappropriated implies they have exclusive owners. No, they don't, though. They don't have exclusive owners. So I'm afraid that doesn't work. The idea that if people have said this, if in Islam, the texts from the Quran are holy, the writing within the Quran is holy. ISIS quote from the Quran when they commit atrocities. Does that mean that you can ban them from using the Quran? Can you ban certain Muslims from using the Quran and allow others? No, of course, no one has the authority to do that. No one can do this. This is not what they're really trying to do. They don't really believe the premise behind this proposed ban, that it's only to be limited to a certain area. It is a false, it's a lie. And if you don't know that yet, it's because you're not really familiar with the sorts of things that are happening in Sweden now. Sweden is a country where this week, one of the right-wing parties is attacked with explosives, with fireworks, as he's attending an event this week. This is the sort of country it is. Sweden is a country where people are chucking grenades around in the south of Sweden for fun. Sweden is a country where rape has increased massively in the past few years since the so-called migrant crisis. Now, I also think that we should remember some other things that happened in Sweden. Do you remember this nonsense? The Viking textile that they said a woman from the University of Uppsala, or working with the University of Uppsala in conjunction with a museum not far from Uppsala, said that this symbol, which was quite a common pattern symbol you can see here, she said that it was actually said Allah, because if you look at a certain type of a very specific type of Islamic art, a very specific time where they stylize the Arabic text in a very specific way, it looks like part of the word Allah, not the entire word. So it's really, really reaching. And of course, it was nonsense, because this symbol is everywhere and it's right next to swastikas. By the way, swastikas are very common, not only in Viking textiles, but even on swords. In New York, for example, in the Metropolitan Museum, you can see a Viking sword with 25 swastikas on each side of the pommel alone, as well as swastikas all over the hilt. There's so many swastikas, I couldn't count them all. It's completely covered in swastikas. So Vikings absolutely adored swastikas. Needless to say, you can't wear swastikas in Sweden already, yet they were religious symbols. And the many Nordic religion followers, Asatruas, or whatever you want to call them, already say that it's unacceptable to wear a swastika. They've already abandoned that symbol because they don't want to offend certain religious groups by wearing it. Well, how far will you go? How many symbols will you give up in order not to offend others? How many other religions in the world do you think would give up their holy symbols so as not to offend Asatruas? I don't think I can think of a single group that would give up a single symbol. But people still continue to bend over. I say you should not bend over. I say they are holy symbols and they should be used as holy symbols. Here's the full text, that there was a swastika, then this symbol, which is obviously not the word Allah, but then this false claim went around for a long time saying that there were Muslim Vikings. And then finally until an expert on the specific type of I think it's called Kufic script, that the Islamic sort of stylized pattern of Arabic, that it was alleged that this pattern was copying. Well, an expert on it said no, absolutely it isn't, and the whole thing was then brushed under a memory hold, and everyone forget that actually no, there were no Muslim Vikings. The whole thing was a publicity stunt, or rather a psyop of some kind, to try and make Swedish people believe that was the case. It's rather like when I did that debunking the or not debunking, when I looked at the different sides in the debate on the burqa woman, whether it was a woman warrior or not. And obviously Uppsala University was involved again, so very clever people, but they obviously wanted it to be a woman, and they were claiming that this was the more obvious explanation rather than the many others, which were clearly more obvious if you look at the context of women in battle in the majority of cultures in history. So there's a tendency in Sweden for misrepresenting history and symbols for a political purpose, which is to be anti-right-wing, to be anti-identity, to be anti-tradition, to be pro everything that isn't traditional, everything that isn't established, everything that is, the modernist, globalist, feminist ideas have of everything. And here, it's not just obviously Sweden that's responsible, because Time magazine recently published this. When did it come out? April 15th, last month. An annoying woman, she's called, I see her, Kim something, Dorothy Kim, I think. She wrote the article, no surprise there, of Vince the Ox, £5. There are no recent books on Aryan culture on Amazon. Why is this, and would you ever write one? You mean the Indo-Aryans or the Vedic religion? I don't know. No, I wouldn't write one. I'm not an expert on Indian history. I already did a big video explaining about the Indo-Iranic, the Proto-Indo-Iranics, the Aryan invasion, and I think that's on the latest data, so no one could possibly make a video based on that because it's all brand new information. So there won't be any books on it. You just need to read the scientific papers if you want to understand the DNA matters. Yeah, going back to the point. Oh yes, there's another. I missed another. Today it's runes, tomorrow the crucifix, says repatriation. You know what? Maybe it is. There's already Swedish churches where or was it English churches? One of the two talking about taking down the crosses so as not to offend Muslims in a certain church. I remember that story. So anyway, Dorothy Kim, she's on Facebook. I'm in a lot of medieval history groups, and always she's posting in them. I always see this annoying woman posting about grievances, racial this, racist that. Oh, there's too many racists here. Everything's racist. Racist. That's all she ever talks about. Is she a historian? Apparently so, but she only ever talks about racism and stuff like that. She's an American, I think, maybe an American or something, some kind of Westerner of Oriental descent. Now, Oriental descent I mentioned because it's obviously very important to her identity and her motivations. Her studying European history is basically a constant complaint about the underrepresentation of so-called people of color, when in fact they are massively overrepresented in academia. There were hardly any. The population of medieval England, the non-white population of medieval England was probably less than 0.001%. It was probably comprised of a few court jesters and a few errant sailors in the port towns. Hardly any. They were certainly not significant in any historic sense. But she's obviously, someone said that, a historical propagandist. Her function is to attack European heritage, attack European identity. And her latest article, where she's talking about white supremacists have weaponized an imaginary Viking past, it's time to reclaim the real history, is complete nonsense. Obviously, it's true that the patriotic elements in the 19th century in Europe have looked at their past for something to celebrate. That's natural patriotic impulse, just as the Chinese do. And I'm sure she doesn't have any problem with the Chinese doing that. Oh, thank you, Horatio Nelson, for that £10 donation. No, she wouldn't mind the Chinese doing that, of course, but she has to constantly complain about underrepresentation of the of the Vikings, or of black Vikings. There were no black Vikings. Every single DNA sample, I assure you, every single DNA sample of a medieval Scandinavian is exactly like a modern Scandinavian. There are, for example, in the trading city of that's just near Stockholm, Sigtuna, they did find there a couple of people who weren't genetically the same as Swedes, but they were buried in that trading town. One was genetically more like a Lithuanian, and the other genetically more like an Englishman. And that strikes me as quite obviously because these were traders who came from England and Lithuania, and they were, of course, white. So that's the closest you've got to a non-white. And I'm sorry, besides what some people think, we English are definitely white as well. But it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. She doesn't just talk about multiracial, multicultural. She even says multiracial. She even says it's multiracial. Completely nonsense, bringing up the Nazis and stuff. And then she says how great it is that Marvel Thor has some Thor Ragnarok has Thor's hammer being destroyed because it's brandished by extremists. It's destroyed, a multiracial post-colonial counter-narrative to the white Viking narrative circulating through the alt-right digital ecosystem. She is celebrating the symbolic elimination of a holy European symbol, Mjolnir. She is celebrating that in print. A non-European person of non-European descent, allegedly a historian dedicated to studying medieval history, is celebrating the symbolic and the depicted destruction of a holy item. That is what's happening. Now, this is the climate that has emerged around history, medieval history, and around the symbols of our ancestors, or particularly the Germanic people's ancestors. But don't think it's going to be exclusively attacking Germanic people, because it won't. Okay, another chat. Palmer Jones, $5. Thank you for your super chat. Glory to Veles. May the bearded one grant us victory. Thank you for your streams. They are like wartime broadcasts. Okay. Thank you very much. So shame on Dorothy Kim, says Hal 9000. Shame indeed on her. And this is the sort of thing we need to be against. We need to stay, we're against it. And this isn't just about being right wingers against left wingers. This is not just about, this is an attack on people, not political people because of their political beliefs. This is an attack on people because of their ethnicity. This is an attack on people because they are Nordic, because of their Germanic ancestry. Swedish people are not supposed to celebrate their runes. They're not supposed to celebrate any of this stuff. This is what they're saying. This is the message of all this. I'm going to switch over back to so you can see my face. Hopefully it'll have improved its quality now. Now how do I do that? Okay, I'm back. So someone said I seem upset. Well, I'll tell you what, I am upset, actually. I am upset. But I'll live. But I just think what upset me is not that this stuff happens, because I expect this stuff to happen. What upset me is that I saw several people on my Facebook page when I posted about this, calling it fake news. Yeah. And denying that this was a bad thing, and saying that it was okay because, oh, they're only going to stop right-wingers using our symbols. You're very naive to think that. You're very naive if you don't understand what's happening. This is an attack on identity. This is an attack on religion as well. It's an attack on pagans, but it's more broadly an attack on an ethnic group. Cheers, son, $15. Thank you very much. So, yeah. So I'm now about halfway through the stream, and I think I've said a lot of what I want to say about it. Like I've talked in other times about how the depiction of history in Swedish media, how I don't like it. I said it, and also in Swedish academia. I talked about the Birka woman. I talked about the representation of the Western hunter-gatherer in that recent documentary about the first Swedes. Now, it's not exclusively a Swedish problem. I've lived in Sweden for 3 years, and I think I can see there are problems there. But I've been to America. I live in Britain now. I've been to France, Italy, and I tell you, don't think that these countries are, you know, in such a better state than Sweden. It's the same stuff is happening everywhere. The same problems are everywhere. But in Sweden, sometimes it's a bit more easy to see because it's a small country, and the government are a bit more brazen with what they think they can get away with. So they go a bit more. They're a bit more audacious, you might say, and therefore it's good to look at them as an example of what you can expect your own rulers in your country to be doing very soon. Basically, in Sweden, the same party, the Social Democrats, have had near monopoly of power for decades. It's almost a one-party system. But that is changing in recent years. That has started to change. I suppose someone might think I was going to say something about the EU elections tonight, but I have no plan on doing so. I really haven't been following it. It should be, the results are coming out soon, but I'm sure someone else will do a stream on that and you can watch them instead, because people don't watch me talk about EU elections. So, Jezebel, £2. Hold the heathen hammer high. So I will, sir. So I will. Where is my heathen hammer? Here's my heathen hammer, and all the bannable symbols on there. And I wore this around in Sweden, and no one did anything to stop me. I wear it in England too. They're holy symbols, and I don't care what anyone says about that. $10. Corey Simmerok. Thank you, Corey. Folk tithe to one of the best of us. Hail. Thank you for saying so. Very kind. £25 from Thor's Tree. Thank you very much indeed. I do love Thor's Tree the most of all trees. The oak, the English oak. We call the English oak is what the name for the oak that is sacred to Thor is in English. It's called the English oak. I don't know what the English oak is known as in other languages, but it's a species of oak. And that's the one that the Lithuanians consider sacred to Perkunos. And that's the one that the Scandinavians considered sacred to Thor. It's the oak that you find in Scandinavia. It's the oak that you find in England. But there are other oaks that you find further south. And the oak has a religious association with the Celts. And obviously the one that they must have liked in Britain was the English oak, because that's the one that grew there. But I wonder, because in the south, the oak wreath they put oak wreaths on a victorious hero. And obviously in Italy, you're not going to find the English oak. But there are other kinds of oaks that grow in scrubbier, drier ground, and the leaves look similar. They're still oak leaves. So for them, perhaps that was the oak that they considered sacred. And I was walking through Central Park last weekend, and looking at the trees, and I don't know any. It's so bizarre to walk through like a place that's basically very similar climate to Europe, and just not know what any of the trees are, because I'm used to just seeing all these trees. They're the trees that my ancestors knew: the elm, the beech, the asp, the lime, or linden as it's also known, the ash, the oak, the white thorn, sacred trees. I don't know any of the trees in America. I don't know what they are. So that must be interesting for American pagans. I don't know which. I mean, there are species of oak in America, but I don't know which ones they consider sacred. Which ones? It's an interesting question. You know, I think I'll answer some questions now, because I don't want to talk about that Swedish stuff anymore. Alison Wagner, great work. Let's encourage everyone to wear Thor's hammer or anything sacred to our people. Yeah. Wear runes on your shirts. Just wear it. Just do it. Challenge them to arrest you. I mean, most of this is not actually the intent to arrest. They haven't even made this legislation in Sweden. It's proposed. They want to gauge the outrage. They want to see how much pride you've got left in you. If you're still willing to get angry, then they're less likely to do it. And if they actually have the goal to try and ban your ancestral symbols, to ban your heritage, then you don't have to. You are required it is your duty to resist that ban. Urtebrunner. Sorry to bring it up, but I'm trying to sort out what exactly is Varg's problem with you. I like you both. It seems like you two should be allies. Oh, well, you can ask Varg. He got angry because first because I had Patreon, and so he started calling me a parasite because he thinks that it's okay when he earns a living from selling games, but when other people are filmmakers, that's not okay. And then also he then started making other insults, and then he got angry because I challenged his bullshit theology about placenta and stuff. So that's a bit simple. I'm not going to go over this again. So just go through all the old videos and things if you want to know more. Have got any questions? Any questions? Sacred tree, banning heritage is a time-honored tactic of oppressive regimes. It certainly is. It's been done for thousands of years. You ban the heritage and you ban the identity. You ban the identity, then you don't have an enemy anymore, because the enemy's strength is their identity that with which they oppose you. Let's stop talking about Varg, please. I really don't want to talk about it. It's boring. Can't state oppression foster a native liberation movement? Frank Slater says. Can't state oppression foster a native movement? We should portray ourselves as a native population resisting colonial settler oppression. Well, Frank, I can see what you're doing there. You're looking at the success of other groups who use this victim status and think that it will work in our favor if we do the same. But I ask you, whose sympathies are you appealing to? To which group do you ask for? Are you asking from which group are you expecting help? There is no one who will help us. There is none. I've explained this in the past in my talks. You can't use a victim mentality because victims require someone to help them, but there's no one to help us. We have to help ourselves, and that means no victimhood. No victimhood. No feeling like you're the little guy against whatever. Maybe even if you are, you need to be your own hero in this story. Forza Europa, $10 Canadian dollars. Could you do a video on non-IE paganism in Europe, like Basque paganism? No, I can't, because there's no evidence of it. I said this before. There are no written texts in non-European, in pre-Indo-European languages. The Basque people are not a pre-Indo-European people. They are a people who speak a pre-Indo-European language. Genetically, they are a relic population of the Iron Age, not the Bronze Age, not the Neolithic when the Indo-Europeans arrived, of the Iron Age. So they have loads of Indo-European DNA. Their pagan customs are very influenced by Indo-Europeans. There is nothing in Europe that can tell us what Neolithic paganism was like. So I can't do anything about it. All I could do is look at some stones and say, oh, the position of these stones. I mean, I can tell you that there were pigs sacrifices at Stonehenge or something like that. Their paganism was probably similar to in the European, in the sense that there were many gods, there were animal sacrifices. We know that. Can't tell you anything more than that. I've repeatedly said this. Sorry that I get if I sound rude. It's just that I know I sometimes expect that everyone's watched every single stream I've done or everything I've done. I know, of course, you haven't, but I just feel like each video I do should be something new, and I don't like to do the same thing over and over, because I feel like I have, for the people who are listening, I should try and do something new. Anyway, a Danish donation, the Thin Red Line. I think it's good here. I think it is good. It will never work. It will just wake people up here in Denmark. About a quarter to a third of all have Mjolnir. So good luck. Really, that many Danes have Mjolnir? That's, oh, you got an accelerationist attitude. I don't know. I don't know about that. But I don't know if that's true about a quarter to a third of Danes having Mjolnir. But it's great if it's true. Rob's Memory Lane. Will you do any videos about Scotland? I'd love to share them with my mother. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I've already done the Orkney one. Did you see that? Videos on Orkney when I went to Orkney. Jekazol. What came first, the Holy Trinity or the three aspects of Odin? The Indo-European tripartite hypothesis is obviously much older than the Holy Trinity. And Odin's three aspects are just one. Everything is in threes in Indo-European religion. It goes way back, way before Christianity. Unconscious bits, £5 donation. Thank you very much indeed. Do you think infiltrating institutions such as the National Trust and English Heritage is a valid tactic? I don't know what you mean by infiltration, but I mean, if you can get a job there and you're justified in influencing your colleagues and those organizations in whatever way you can. Wow. I mean, it's those organizations should be, they're good. Their existence is a good thing because they're there to preserve heritage. But unfortunately, some of the people involved in those organizations are not so much interested in our heritage, if you know what I mean, which is a shame. But the studies on Basques I've read have shown them genetically to be mostly Neolithic farmer and Western hunter-gatherer. Yeah, same with everyone in Europe. I'm telling you that they are the same as Iron Age people in Spain. The difference between Basque people and other people in Spain is that not that they have no Indo-European DNA, because they do have Indo-European DNA. The difference is that they might have slightly less than some, but not much. I mean, the main difference is that they didn't get so much Arab DNA. So they must have, because of the fact they spoke a different language, maybe they were isolated more. So when the Islamic conquests of Europe happened, when they started to invade Europe and conquer areas of Spain, the Basques didn't mix with the Arabs quite as much as other people did. But they're not a Neolithic population. They have not preserved anything Neolithic of it. The only thing they preserved of the early Neolithic is their language. We think. We don't know how much Basque has changed in the past 3,000 or 4,000 years. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. Look how much English has changed. English and Scandinavian, Swedish and English were mutually intelligible like just over 1,000 years ago. And now they're not at all. So think about that when you think about Basque in the last 4,000 years. So, I mean, I don't like when people over-exaggerate the importance of Basque. It really isn't. They're really not that. I mean, they're great culture, whatever, nice people, but they're really not as special as people think. Like, they're not some relic. Some people say they're the original inhabitants of Europe or some nonsense like this. It's nonsense. They're just an Iron Age relic population in that sense. Muzzies didn't get all of Spain, authentic person. Well, if you want to know about the genetics of Iberia, I've made a full video on it. It's only for patrons. If you become a patron on Patreon or on Subscribestar, you can scroll through the videos and you get access to some which are private just for patrons. And one of them, I go through all the genetics of Spain and I talk about exactly how much Muslim or sub-Saharan African DNA is in Spain and whereabouts in Spain it is and what times in history it entered, because it didn't all enter during the Islamic time. There was some there already before that. Anyway, Fortune Glory, $5. Thank you very much. Any good books on the battle axe or bell beaker culture? I changed my holiday decorations to traditional pagan and the symbolism inspired others. I'm glad that you did that and the decorations have been inspirational. I don't know. I've never read a book about battle axe or bell beaker cultures. I do say I read books and studied medieval history. So I read a lot of books on medieval history. But when I study Neolithic and Bronze Age stuff, it's more like I read it's chapters in books, it's articles online, it's scientific papers. I really read papers and scientific papers and genetics and stuff, and I catch up on archaeology online more than anything else. So no, I've never read a single book on the bell beaker culture. I don't know how to advise one, but I do recommend, since you're an internet user, that you just look online for the latest stuff. Like if you want to learn about bell beakers, Bell Beaker Blogger. He's the whole blog called Bell Beaker Blogger, and he's just got all the latest stuff blogging about bell beaker culture. It's great. And battle axe culture, you can probably find a lot online. I really recommend Eurogenes. It's one of my favorite blogs because he just talks about all different kinds of genetic stuff. He's recently done a blog post about how the Nordic Bronze Age people are essentially the same as modern Nordics very much, and that there was no invasion into Scandinavia that caused the Nordic Bronze Age. She's got like stuff like that all the time. So go and check that blog out. Thoughts on GEDmatch? Reliable? Which calculator? Which data set? Which thing are you talking about? GEDmatch is just it's a website that you upload your data to and you compare it with different calculators. The Eurogenes data on there is quite good, but I'd say that's the best, or maybe the only one I trust on there, the Eurogenes set. However, it's much better if you just send your data directly to Eurogenes, because he's got more samples now that he uses to make PCAs and like compare your DNA with other ancient samples than he did when he donated those that data set to GEDmatch. So GEDmatch one's older. So yeah. What do you think? It says asks Chaos, and thanks for the £5, Kay. What do you think are the most important stories for English children to hear for a strong sense of identity? I love your videos. Thank you so much. Good question, Kay. I think the most important ones, you've got to know, you've got to tell them the story of, you've got to read Beowulf to them in some form, even if it's a childlike form. That might be hard because I don't know if there is a children's version of Beowulf, but you do it. You can probably find it. There are children's versions of the life of King Alfred. I think that's important. He's the king who founded the country, essentially. There are children's versions of King Arthur's myths. I think they're very good as well. So definitely ones with heroes, but also those are very important for English people. But you know what? The Odyssey and the Iliad. When I was a kid, I didn't know, like I didn't get English myth. It was all for me Greek myth. I love Greek myths. I loved the tasks of Heracles the most when I was a kid because of the monsters. Little boys especially love monsters, dragons, dinosaurs, things like that. So it just captivates their imagination. And also it's got some really good values that it imparts on them. The unconquerable hero who strives against the monsters. So I hope that helps you to decide what to give your children for bedtime stories. Ragenmund, thank you for your $15. Thank you for speaking out against these wicked events going on in Sweden. Hopefully we don't start seeing the same thing here in the States. Stand strong and make no truce or treaty to your foes. Well, this sort of thing is happening in the States. You've got to understand, like, okay, the States, you don't have the same kind of brazen legislation against the people because you have the Constitution. But the academe, you go into the universities, you look in the corporate offices of the big companies in America. It's the same ideology that's in the Swedish government. It's the same ideas, the same catchphrases, it's the same. So you're thinking, oh, I hope it doesn't come to the States. It's in the States, it's been in the States for a long time, and the States are the one who export it worldwide. It wouldn't be a global problem if it wasn't for the States, to be honest. So don't rest on your laurels, is my advice to Americans. Swastikas are illegal in New York, someone says. Well, I saw in the New York Museum, the Metropolitan Museum, you can see a lot of swastikas all over the Greek stuff, Greek vases, Viking sword with swastikas, all kinds of artwork, old artwork with swastikas. So maybe someone should call the NYPD and get them to pick up. I actually saw on my plane when I flew to America, there was all English policemen in uniform on the plane. And when they got off, they were greeted by the NYPD. So the NYPD were giving some British Met Police some training, I guess. I don't know what kind of training, but it made me laugh anyway. Someone says a lot of this stuff originates in the US. Dorothy Kim, for example, is out of Brandeis University near Boston. Some interesting history about that place on the wiki page. Well, I mean, it's like I said, like, don't think of Sweden as like this, isolated place where all these things happen that don't affect you. If you're not Swede, and you can it's not that Sweden is different from anywhere else, really. Like, the stuff that's happening in Sweden is stuff that is in the globalized world, globalized network of like culture and power systems, corporate systems, interconnected governments with trade agreements, etc. There's you know, the nation state is almost an illusion, unfortunately. So this stuff, be on your guard for it wherever you live. What beer am I drinking? 6X. 6X. I only drink a bitter, really. It's a bitter. Are you planning on living in the forest at some point? Well, I kind of I've got forests. I got my own forest here and there, and then I got there's public forest over that way. So I'm close enough into the forest as I care to be. You can't. I mean, yeah. I live in England, so as far as you can anyway. So it gets pushed down through the institutions and corporations via the UN. Someone says. Pabst Blue Ribbon. That's like water to an Englishman. That tastes like water, like Pabst Blue Ribbon. It tastes like soda. It doesn't have any flavor at all. Rob's Memory Lane. Thank you for your $10 donation. I love your videos when you collaborate with other YouTubers like the Golden One. I'd like to see you take someone like Mark Collett or On the Offences and give them a tour and discuss what you see. Maybe I do. You know, we see what happens. I used to hang out with the Golden One a lot when I lived in Sweden, but where I live now, no one lives near here. I live in the middle of nowhere now, so there's no other YouTubers around here. Do I often drink mead? I use it for ritual sometimes. It's not a drink that I actually care to drink frequently. It's very sweet often. I've tried probably more meads than most people. I've tried a lot of different meads. In Poland, I've drank lots. In Sweden, I've drank lots. I've tried pretty much every commercial. I've tried definitely every commercial brand in England and some small independents. And I've also had friends brew mead for me. So I've tried all kinds of mead. And generally, I think it's quite sweet, and I don't really like sweet things too much. But yeah, it's okay. It's not a bad drink. Well, got another 10 minutes. By the way, also I'll shell for him again. If you like alcohol, if you want to talk about alcohol, the latest podcast from Brute Norse is all about Nordic culture of alcohol and brewing. So it's about the definitions of beer and cider and mead and things like that, and how they kind of mix, because some of the meads had grain in them, and some of the beers had honey in them, and some of what they call beer had fruit in it. So sometimes what they call beer might be what we call a cider, and sometimes what they call beer or mead, the line between them is quite hard to determine, because nowadays we have very clear ideas of what is beer, what's mead, etc. So I think you'd have some quite interesting and unusual flavors back in the medieval times. And obviously nothing was flavored with hops until Christian times. And I don't really like hoppy beers. I like malty beers, like bitter malty beer. Hops is the kraut weed, they call it. The demon weed of the krauts. TK Morgan's $40. Thank you very much, generous. What were Nordic and Anglo-Saxon views on one taking their own life? Well, they certainly didn't consider it a sin as such, because they didn't have sin. So the idea that you would be punished for it in the afterlife didn't exist then. Now, I don't think they had a blanket rule for suicide, like it's good or bad, but there were circumstances where it could be good, and there were circumstances where it could be bad. So I think, for example, there's Tacitus gives an example of one tribe of Danes, I think it's the Teutons, where the women, if their husbands lost in battle, the women would commit suicide, because that was more honorable than being touched by foreign hands. They wouldn't allow themselves to be given over to foreign men because they valued their tribe and their people so much. That was considered to be an honorable suicide. There are also examples, I can't remember, in the sagas where it seems to indicate that when people got old and weak, it was better for them to kill themselves rather than, be a burden on their society. and that was also considered honorable. But I'm sure there were situations where it would not be honorable to commit suicide. For example, to escape from responsibility, to try and get away from your problems. That would be considered dishonorable. And everything's about honor and pride and shame. It's an honor culture, so it's all about something is either honorable or it is shameful. So that's the key there. I guess it was quite similar to Japanese culture in their views of suicide. For example, suicide can be very honorable and even a duty that you ought to commit suicide in certain circumstances in traditional Japanese culture, whereas in others, it is not honorable. But obviously, they weren't exactly the same because they're very different cultures. But I just wanted to give you the example of Japan, something that you're probably aware of, and you can try and get your head around how a very different attitude towards suicide might be. Oh, by the way, those views on suicide were only Nordic. I have no idea what the Anglo-Saxon views on suicide were, but all the written texts we have from Anglo-Saxons are from the Christian times, at which point suicide is a mortal sin. So it means that if you commit suicide, you will go to hell. Rob's Memory Lane. Another donation. Thank you. $5. Come to America and try the microbreweries. I literally just got back from America. The ABV is much higher. Higher than what? We have strong beers, way stronger than that. I was disappointed when I visited UK and the beer was only 4% like Guinness. We have like literally thousands and thousands of breweries. I mean, and breweries, there are breweries opening up all the time. Each village and town has its own brewery. So you can't know possibly what the ABV is in the UK. That's an absurd statement. Like microbreweries in America are, and these like craft beer has become influential in England too. So we have American style craft beers here too. But the tradition of American craft beers is derived from English ales. You call it like IPA or APA. That's an English style beer. You have stout. That's an English beer. Porter. That's an English beer. All of these things come from England except lager and pilsner. That's German and whatever, Slavic, or it's no good anyway. All the good beer is bitter. If it's brown, it's good. That's simple. And we have varying strengths depending on what the function is. The strongest is called barley wine, and barley wine can be 15% alcohol or something like that. You drink that under certain circumstances, maybe, but it's not an everyday beer. It would be a bit strange. Porter is also stronger than others, but I don't want to make this an alcohol podcast or whatever. I mean, Brute North. Go to listen to Brute North if you want to hear more alcohol talk. Sweden has terrific beer, someone says. All right. I don't know about that, but what's your if it's brown, chug it down. Come on, ye lads of high renown, who loves to drink strong ale that's brown, and pull the lofty pheasant down with cartridge, shot and gun. Yeah, did you hear that pheasant then? After I said that, he didn't like me saying that. I hope it came through on the mic. A pheasant clocked when I said that. Oh well, it's coming up to the end of this podcast now. What was the god of Scotland? The King of England. Do you watch the Consequence of Cowardice video? I don't know. I think maybe. Was that the Jonathan Bowden? Brewdog in Scotland. It's just a very commercial normie brewery. Normie brewery. Anyway. Oh, Eddie Carlson. Thank you for your donation. From Sweden. If Romans and Greeks are Indo-European and they originally shared gods and customs with the rest of Europe, did they really take Greek gods and only change their names? What? I don't understand the question. That Indo-Europeans came into Europe through the main area they came in was through Eastern Europe into Germany. That became the Corded-Ware heartland, out of which cultures derived, the Belgica culture, etc., and then the different languages and stuff. Now, an Indo-European religion would have influenced regional religions in Europe of the Neolithic. Now, the Greek and the Roman religions were like that too. So their similarities are because of the Indo-European heritage, not because of stuff that happened later on. I hope that, I don't really understand what the question was, but I hope that answers it for you, because it was a little bit unclear. Eddie, sorry if it wasn't Eddie. But Robert Hurst, should the worship of pagan gods be based on the practitioner's ethnicity? I made a video on this. It's a patron-only video. It's called about folkish versus universalist, and I talk about that question in detail. It's a full hour talk, so I needed a full hour to go through it. So if you want to know, then become a patron, and then you can see that video. Well, I think I've done enough for now tonight. It's a full hour, and I really enjoyed chatting tonight, except I did get a bit angry before, but it's important to be angry sometimes. I think it was Plotinus who said, or was it Proclus, that anger is virtue when it's, or was it hatred is virtue when it's turned to anger, which directs just action. Anyway, I'll say good night to you all. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you have watched my May Day video. If you have, then please share it and get other people to watch it, because at the moment it hasn't got very many views, and I spent a long time on it. And if you haven't watched it, then immediately go and watch this. Go and watch this. But first, smash that like button. Smash it. And then elbow to the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already, okay? All right, then. Good night, everybody.